Public speaking. It's the number one fear, even ahead of death, according to some people. And in construction, where technical expertise rules, presenting with clarity and confidence can make or break your impact as a leader. And my guest today is John Zalepka. He has trained tens of thousands of construction pros, from engineers to executives, on how to turn complex ideas into clear, persuasive presentations. In this episode, we dive into overcoming fear, connecting with any audience, and giving presentations that actually move the needle. Let's get right into it. This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. John, welcome to Construction Genius.
Oh, thanks so much, Eric. I appreciate the opportunity to be on the show.
You've trained tens of thousands of professionals in fire protection and construction. What common fears or barriers do you see technical experts face when they first step into presenting, and how do you help them overcome those fears?
So that's a great question. I've trained many technical experts, engineers and project managers, superintendents, even all the way up to the C-suite over the years. And it isn't a lack of knowledge that I've found. These people know their stuff, let's face it. But what the common fear, I think, is that they don't want to look foolish or forget what they're going to say, right? So Jerry Seinfeld, he had the famous joke. He said that public speaking was the number one fear, even over death. So most people would rather be lying dead in the coffin than giving the eulogy at the funeral. And he got a lot of laughs because it's true. And I feel that even accomplished leaders in the construction industry feel that pressure when all eyes are on them. And there's no secret recipe. It's not magic. It's preparation and it's practice. So that's really what it comes down to. So whether you're talking to board of directors or a major client or even the entire company at a sales meeting, if you just wing it, you're not going to be confident. That's for sure.
In your experience working with people, I'm just curious, how many people have little to no fear of public speaking?
If someone said that they didn't have any fear, I'd say that they were probably lying. Because even me, and people are always like, you still get nervous? Absolutely. And I use that nervousness as energy. And, once you start talking, as long as you are prepared and you've practiced, and you're not going to have that fear for very long. But it's still there. It creeps in,
That's interesting. So I find it interesting because, I've been public speaking for, 30 years, whatever the case may be. And I've never had an innate fear of public speaking. The only time I get like a little bit nervous is maybe in like a really big occasion, or, obviously if I'm not prepared at all, I'd be very, very nervous. It's interesting though, because I do think there are some people who just have no innate fear of public speaking, but I don't know why that is. That's why I asked you that, because I have no idea why I'm like that. And it was just something that I thought I'd explore with you.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I think whether I'm speaking to 1 or 1,000 people, I personally, I'm an introvert and no one ever believes me. They're like, how is the speaker guy an introvert? But I'd rather be speaking to the group of 1,000, but it's the same whether it's 1 or 1,000. If you're prepared and you kind of have an idea of what you want to say, then those fears and those butterflies go away pretty quick.
That's cool. And that's interesting because you have this book, The Presenter's Playbook, and you emphasize turning complex ideas into clear, persuasive presentations. Now, I think that's one of the hardest things to do because, when someone gets up in front of a group, they may be comfortable at some point. They may even be very prepared, but their communication lacks that clarity and simplicity that's essential when you're presenting to a group of people. So how does that happen?
It happens all the time. And that's kind of why I wrote The Presenter's Playbook, is because I was tired of hearing bad presentations, but when, especially in construction, it can get very technical very fast, and you don't want to lose people. And one example that kind of stands out in my mind is I was with the owner of a construction company, and they used continuing education almost as a business tool. So he asked me to ride along with one of his rising leaders who came through our train-the-trainer program. And this guy was well equipped to go in there and talk history and physics and ASTM standards. And the problem was that the job site crew wasn't going to care about things like that. They care about things like inspections and schedules and safety. And do I have to go back? Am I going to get paid? Right. So if he stuck with the approach of just showing up and throwing up and putting the slides that he thought he were prepared, he would have lost the room. And I just kind of helped him reframe that and said, here's the job that we're tackling today. Here's why it matters to you. And here are a couple things that you need to focus on to get that job done today. And I kind of was reminded, just as I was talking there, is one of my mentors, Mark Nunn, I wrote about it in the book there. And he did the same thing for me. I was cramming details and I was up and I was going to present. And he said, Johnny, it's not about what you know. It's about what they need to know. And that kind of stuck with me. And that's the same kind of advice that I pass on to other people today.
Yeah, and I think it's something that I know I've struggled with in my presentations over the years is, to me, it doesn't feel like there's too much information, but as soon as you get into the presentation, the volume, not just the technical detail, but the volume of information that you have seems to be too much, and there's a need to edit. So when you're preparing the presentation, obviously you want to be as clear and as straightforward as possible, but how do you deal with the volume issue?
I think it starts with kind of taking the amount of time that you have and using that to the best of your ability. So if it's 5 minutes, what's your key point and how are you going to get that out there in 5 minutes? If it's an hour, what 3 things do I want them to walk away with so that they can be actionable at the end of this? And I just think that there's so much information, right? But you want, if it's a training session, you want people to take action. There needs to be some kind of call to action. So if you can get that in whatever allotted time that you have, that's really what it comes down to, is just narrowing it down to 1 or 2 or 3 main points.
Yeah, that's interesting. So let me ask you this. I've always found this fascinating. Why is 3 points like the essential number? It seems like that. Whenever I'm doing a presentation, I think having 3 points, somehow there's magic to that. Why is that?
I've heard different theories on it, but 2 kind of makes it look like you didn't prepare enough, and 4 is just too much for people to remember. So 3 actually just seems to be the magic number. There's a divinity about it, if you will.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's a trip, right? I don't know why that is. It's interesting. In your experience, I've seen a lot of people wing it, right? So it's interesting. I was talking about earlier, my lack of fear in public speaking and also having an ability to speak extemporaneously. And often I've reflected on how that's actually a disadvantage, because then a person who's like that can lean on that and not prepare. So what shifts when someone goes from winging it to really being prepared? What is necessary when someone particularly is perhaps able to speak in front of people?
No, that's a great question. I love the way you phrase it too, because I think the problem there is overconfidence, right? Let's call it what it is. And sometimes you feel like you're good and you can wing it because you've said it a million times and you've seen this type of audience before. So you just like, I'll just show up and wing it. You don't know how much time you're going to use. And, your 15 minutes is gone before you even got to your main point. So even though you're a pro at this, you need to prepare for whatever that allotted time is. I find the shorter period of time, the more you need to prepare because you don't get a second shot of that 5 minutes, So in order to get that confidence, it's like, I remember an old interview with Kobe Bryant, and they asked him, does he ever get nervous taking that big game-winning shot? And he said no, because by the time I got to game 7, I already practiced that same shot 1,000 times. So whether it's in the driveway or on the biggest stage, he just knows that it's going to go in because he trusted the reps. So when you get the reps, and again, you need to prepare first, I always say, and then practice. Because if you don't know what to practice, then you're still winging it.
Yeah, it's interesting. So many times in construction, you come into a construction environment and you've got the field, you've got the office, you've got operations. And so you have this diverse group and you're needing to be able to present to the whole group. What are some ways that someone can think through that process so that they're able to engage everyone and not have a section of the room just check out immediately?
So that is an interesting one where, there's always going to be some type of a commonality amongst your audience. So what is that? Do you all work for the same company? Or are you all on the same project? So to find what that common goal is essential, I think, because your audience is your audience. Whether you're talking to, I remember one time I was talking at a back to school night. So there was 1,000 parents there. So all ages and backgrounds of parents, where they came from. But the common theme was that they all had school age children and they cared about how we can help the local PTO, right? So there's some common theme in every audience, and it's finding what that message is. Now, you may need to tailor your pitch a little bit. I'm going to be doing a hybrid event, where I'm going to be talking to contractors and architects at the end of the year, and contractors are going to be live in audience, but I'm going to be giving some educational content to the architects online. So I'm going to have to figure out a way. So hopefully I say something smart in the next few minutes and I can give myself some advice. But no, seriously, you do have to kind of tailor your pitch if you know that there are some different audiences and why each one of them should care about the overall message and the overall goal of the project or the timeline or whatever it is that you're working on.
So how do you begin your preparation process then? Let's say you've been given a topic, you have a speech to make, you want to be clear, you don't want to kill them with PowerPoint. Perhaps you have that diverse audience. What is your process for preparation?
So the process is, I've already said the words a few times, but the acronym is AMP, right? Audience, message, and then whatever it is, your presentation, your pitch, your project, pick your P. But you want to make sure that your message lands with your audience. I used to call it MAP because I thought it was clever. You have a map to a good speech, but when you put the message first, then you discount the audience. So by leading with the audience, you can always get your message right. So let's say you're looking at a presentation and you do have that diverse group that you just mentioned in there, and it's a high-rise, beautiful building, floor-to-ceiling glass, and there's an architect in the room. So your message to them is, we can build this precisely the way that you drew it up.
Yeah.
Your client in the room, you look over and you say, and by the way, we can deliver this on time, under budget, and with zero compliance issues. And then to your superintendent, you say, you can do this, right? And then you check in along the way and you say, did you do it? And then you say, you did it. Great job. And Eric, I might have just stolen your ear there.
I think you did. You just did. Whoa, that was beautiful.
One great acronym deserves another, though. So that's how I prepare for any presentation: is audience, message, presentation, AMP. There it is.
How does someone balance authenticity, being their authentic self, with the need to engage the audience? Because again, even if you're clear on what you're saying and you have an understanding of your audience, some people just aren't dynamic speakers. So they're not naturally going to be engaging people. What advice do you have for someone who's boring?
So no one's boring. We all have good stories. You just have to get them out there. And if you've ever read any book or taken any course or anything on public speaking, they're going to say you have to become a great storyteller. And you need to become a storyteller, right? Storytelling's been around since the beginning of time. Picture cavemen around a campfire, right? But you don't have to be great, but you have to be real. And that's another acronym. And unfortunately, there's 4 in this one instead of 3. But when we talk about real, you need to have a relatable character, R, that encountered a problem, E. You took some type of an action, that's the A, and then you learned a lesson, and that's L. Because that's where the storytelling really is human and relatable there. Let me think of, I worked with a construction executive, or back in the day, I was on a job site and we had a better mousetrap for what they were doing there. And it was a much more expensive fire stopping device. There was an old school method that would have worked perfectly, putty and caulk, which is a lot cheaper. But he understood that the last job he was on, the facility director, so that's a relatable character because now he's talking to this facility director, encountered a problem because the Joint Commission came because someone popped the putty out and didn't put it back. So they had non-compliance. They had to go back. There was delays. The hospital had to shut down. So he took some action, which he said, next time let's put this higher quality device in. And you learned a lesson that by investing a little bit more money up front, you can save time, money, and your reputation downstream. So just by, telling a simple story of something that happened to him previously on another job that went wrong, you just make it real. And I think people aren't expecting you to be a polished Tony Robbins kind of speaker, know, but if you can kind of show the value and reduce risk or increase margin, then this is what people are looking for. Real stories, REAL.
Yeah, it's interesting. So you begin with your audience, your message, and then the project that you have in mind. And then from there, in order to get clear and in order to be compelling, you want to build those relatable, those real stories into what it is that you're doing. Give me the E again. What was the E?
Encountered a problem.
Yeah, encountered a problem. That's it.
A relatable person encountered a problem, took some action, learned a lesson.
Yeah, no, I like that. That's really good. That's really good. Yeah. And so that's the essence of every single movie that we ever watch, right? Is right in there. And one of the arts of presenting is being able to pull stories out that you've got to start with the audience in mind, though, right? When you're building those stories.
Always.
I'll give you an example. So sometimes I use sports analogies in my presentations, and I'm from Northern California, so I'm a San Francisco Giants fan. I was down in Southern California giving a presentation to some guys who were all Dodger fans. And as soon as I started talking about my San Francisco Giants illustration, they're like this, they just close off immediately, which is cluelessness on my part, right? You've got to think about your audience first as you're building those stories.
Right, for sure.
That's interesting.
All right, quick break to talk about my book, Construction Genius. This is what I want you to do. Go to Amazon, search for the book, read all of the 5-star reviews, because there's a ton of them. Over 50 to be precise. And the reason I want you to read them is because real people wrote those reviews who've actually read the book. And it'll give you an idea of why you should go and buy a copy right now on Amazon. And here's the deal. If you purchase 10 or more copies for your company, and then send me an email, eric@constructiongenius.com, I'll come in via Zoom and do a 1-hour Q&A and a bonus training session with your team at no charge. I normally charge $4,500 for an hour of my time. And again, for you, I'll do it at no charge if you buy 10 or more copies of my book. And the reason you should buy it is all in the title. It's effective, hands-on, practical, simple, no BS, leadership, strategy, sales, and marketing advice for construction companies. So if you're in the construction industry, this book is for you. So you can get it on Amazon. You can also get it on Audible in the audio version as well, narrated by yours truly. And I know you'll really enjoy it. So go out and get the book. And now back to the interview.
Okay, so now some people have a feel for the audience. Others don't, right? And so, you're sitting there maybe watching a presentation. The guy has just totally lost the room and he has no idea. And there's other people who are more nimble on their feet. They're more intuitive and they're able to pick up the vibe of the audience. What tips do you have for understanding where the audience is and how they're responding to your presentation in the middle of the presentation?
Listen, it doesn't always go perfect and sometimes it goes really bad, right? So I say find the friendly face in the audience, take a deep breath and keep going. If you are prepared and, sometimes read the audience wrong, or sometimes you show up with the wrong presentation, or you thought it was one thing and it's completely something different, and you start talking and you're like, wow, this isn't going to work. So you either need to pivot or just find that friendly face and keep going and hope that you can read the audience right and figure out maybe where you went wrong in your preparation. But I think by being prepared and having a solid message, you might stumble in the beginning, and that might be what you're picking up on, the vibe of the audience going, I don't know if I trust this guy, right? He said something that I didn't understand, or he mumbled a little bit, or his opening was a little weak. But if you keep going, like I said, sometimes it's just those butterflies, and sometimes I find my voice quivering even in the beginning of a talk, and I'm like, what is going on here? I've said these words a million times. Yeah. But just keep going, it would be my advice.
Yeah, that's good. So let's talk about the beginning of the presentation. What are some tips or techniques that you have for just grabbing the audience by the throat, so to speak, and really bringing them in immediately so that you kind of start with a bang?
I'd catch them off guard, do something a little bit different. I was speaking at an ASHE show, which is for the healthcare engineers, and I just started in the audience. They were expecting to see someone up on the stage, and 7 a.m. came. It was a breakfast meeting, and I was down there with them, and I just started talking, and they were like, whoa, what's happening? And I started with a story, and I think a lot of times if you can start with a story, and again, it's funny. It's right after I wrote this book, so I was like, I should better take my own advice here, right? So I kept it real. I said this was healthcare engineers who want to be promoted to facilities managers, facilities directors. So I started by saying, picture this. You just got promoted. Congratulations. And then I gave a little fist pump to someone in the audience. And it was like a little bit different than most of the 7 a.m. breakfast meetings that they were used to attending at the show there. So I think, catching people a little bit off guard, but with a message that's on point, is have them leaning in for the rest of your talk.
Okay, so you started with a bang, like you were saying, but I find oftentimes in presentations what happens is they start well, but there's this lag in the middle. It gets a little saggy. It gets a little boring. People start picking up their phones and all this kind of stuff. How do I avoid that middle presentation lag?
You don't. You actually re-engage them with some type of some activity that maybe uses their phone, right? So if I'm talking to Lunch and learn, I have a full hour. So the architects fully expect to be there for an hour.
Right.
And halfway through, they're going to start grabbing their phones. Well, guess what? I'm going to put up a polling app, or I'm going to use a tool like Kahoot, which is going to ask some questions about some of the most technical points that I've been making up until then. And oh, by the way, we're going to give this little prize away. Oh, a prize? So now people are going to use their phone for something important during the talk. Now, if I'm on a job site with union laborers, am I going to do that? Probably not. I mean, the cost of their time, as you know, is enormous. And if I've got them for 15 minutes, that time needs to be valuable and fast. So maybe in that case, we talk about why this is important. I give them some detailed instruction sheets or installation sheets, and on their phones, we go and we show them where they can find them so that they know what they need to use, where they can get it, how they use it. And again, something that's immediately actionable, usable after you leave that presentation or training.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think one of the most effective things you can do is get people up on their feet, moving around, doing something.
100%.
Even if it's as simple as just walking around the room and greeting someone who you've never met before and just exchanging, details and, what you do and who you are and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I often start my trainings by putting people in groups of people they've never met before and have them introduce each other. And it works well because it kind of takes the pressure. I don't have to talk about myself. Yep. I just have to talk about this guy that I just met. So it takes the pressure off of people, but it gets people up and talking and out of their seats, like you said.
I like that one. Yeah, that's very good. Yeah, having people talk about somebody else, because some people are uncomfortable talking about themselves publicly. Sure. That's awesome. Okay, so let's say I'm going along in my presentation and all of a sudden the PowerPoint fails, or there's a technical issue, or the mic goes out. How do you handle that kind of stuff?
With preparation. If it happens and it's the first time you're ever seeing these slides, then you're in trouble. But if your entire presentation is built up in your PowerPoint and it goes out, you're dead in the water, right? I've seen this happen all the time, whether it's can't get the display settings to cooperate, or there's no second screen, or you don't have what I call that confidence monitor there. Then, then sometimes even when it does work out, you don't have a way to see your notes, right? You're on stage here and your notes are over there. So I always tell people, listen, prepare as if it is going to fail, that your PowerPoint is going to go out in the middle of your PowerPoint. Have that notebook, 1 or 2 pages where you've gone through each one of the slides. You have your bullet points so that even if you don't have the PowerPoint, you can at least get through and paint that picture. Hey, this is what the slide would have looked like. Ha, ha, ha. And sometimes those tech failures are the best presentations if you show up prepared. And just having notes, even if you have notes and everything's working great, people see you looking at your notes, as long as you're not reading a script, you look professional. You look like you've prepared for this particular audience, and people appreciate humbleness. So I think if you could just be humble in that moment and say, I'm going to do the best I can here, folks, I think they all have your back.
So that's interesting, because I was thinking about this earlier. Some people, when they prepare, I know some very well-known professional speakers who memorize their presentations. And then there's other people who, like you said, rely on their PowerPoint. And, you can just tell that if the PowerPoint wasn't there, they're cooked. What's your opinion on that balance between the detailed preparation, perhaps memorization, and then sort of the more superficial presentation? What's the balance there?
That's a great question. And I just had this discussion with someone the other day, and going back to that same example of the story that I told at 7 a.m. Person that asked me about it, they were like, were you reading off of a script? Because you nailed that. I was like, no, I practiced that 100 times. She's like, what? I didn't think you ever practiced anything 100 times. And I'm like, well, I don't practice the technical content 100 times, but you better believe the story that I want to draw people in on, I've practiced. And that's not about rote memorization either. That's about knowing your material and then reading the crowd. So as I was going there, even some of the things that I thought I was going to say, and sometimes you'll say something that's funny and you didn't even realize it was going to be funny. And then you need to, in that moment, stop talking and let those laughs roll, right? So you do need to memorize certain things, but memorization will allow you to be more flexible with your message there. And then those technical details, if you're a professional in the industry, whatever you're presenting on, you've said those words a million times. And that's why I always advise weaving stories into that technical material. That's where you won't lose the audience also. But memorize those stories and just know your material.
So then for each section of your presentation, let's say you have 3 main, you have an introduction, you have 3 main points that you want to make, and then you have a conclusion. Would you say that under each one of those main points, you should have a story just to help people stay engaged?
Yeah, a story or a mini story. Again, something that's relatable and there's a lesson in there. I mean, I wrote about Jeffrey Gitomer. I don't know if you've ever read him, but
No,
He was
I've heard of
great.
him.
Yeah, I went to see him speak one time, and he was very sales oriented, and he told all these stories. But the stories are what you remembered. It wasn't the facts and the figures. But then it was a funny thing. At the end of it, he started asking people about the facts and figures in his story, and people could recall those because he wove those into the story. So I think by telling stories and kind of weaving some of that, why is that data sheet information important on the installation temperature? So if you can relate it to why it's important to them, then it's not just material or just information. It's actually something they can use.
It's interesting.
Think about the last time you promoted someone into a leadership role and it failed. Why did it fail? I can tell you one reason. People know how to build projects, but they don't know how to build and lead teams of people. Construction comes with its challenges that only insiders truly understand. Generic leadership training doesn't cut it. You need a program to train your leaders built specifically for construction professionals led by an industry expert. And my online course, The Shift, is exactly that course. It has 5 modules. It'll teach your people how to control their calendars and reduce stress and embrace chaos and accomplish their critical tasks. It will teach them the 3 essential messages they have to communicate every day in order to motivate and lead their team effectively. It'll show them how to build and lead a high-performing team, give them a framework for running effective meetings so they'll be able to solve problems in less than an hour, and also give them a higher perspective on their leadership that will enable them to work on the business and on their teams and not get stuck in the weeds micromanaging. So go out to my website, theshift.constructiongenius.com, read all about the course, and then enroll yourself and your leaders in the course, and I guarantee that it will transform your leadership. If it does not, you take the whole course and you didn't get benefit from it, you just send me an email, eric@constructiongenius.com, and I will cheerfully refund you 100% of your money. I'm really confident this course will transform your leadership. So again, go out to the website, theshift.constructiongenius.com, learn more about the course, and start taking it today.
Let me ask you about the structure of stories. One thing I've noticed that some presenters do is they'll begin their presentation with a story. And going back to your framework of real, they bring in the problem and then they begin to talk about the actions, but they leave that learned part open and they don't close that loop until at the end of their presentation. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I mean, of course, and there are certain times where that has to happen. And as I mentioned, certain accredited type trainings that you're doing for architects or continuing education, sometimes you do have to leave that open. But well, you're talking about the lesson, actually. Now, the lesson really should come right away of what the problem was in each one of those stories. But there are times where the lesson is the product, right? So that's where sometimes you have to leave that lesson until the end. But if you're telling a story, there's nothing better than wrapping that story up quick, because that's what people are going to remember. You don't want to have to go, hey, remember that thing I was telling you about 20 minutes ago? Yeah, well, that guy actually learned this. But we've seen bad speakers out there, and that's what we're hoping to avoid here.
Well, it's interesting, though, because I was thinking if I begin with that, let's say I have sort of an overarching theme for my presentation. I'm able to tie a story to that. And let's say when I get to the action part of your framework, right? Maybe my 3 points that I'm going to share in my presentation are those actions. And so what I'm doing throughout my presentation is I've hooked them with the story at the beginning, and I'm weaving that all the way through my presentation and then closing it up with the learned lessons at the end. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And again, that's sometimes those are the technical presentations, because even when we're building some things out, you need to solve a problem or else people aren't going to care to come, right? If it's just more information, I'm like, I already know that. But a lot of times I ask people, it's even when in coaching, especially, it's like, yeah, you've heard it before, but how good are you at that? You know,
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that they're learning these lessons. They have these calls to actions at the end there. And sometimes people do it in the wrong order, but I think you should probably tighten your stories up to prove each one of your points. And then your closing story kind of ties everything together, including your opening, how we started. Remember that one problem we had, that other problem we had, that third problem we have. And again, this is how now we can solve that problem. So It was always kind of a formula that someone told me back in Toastmasters: tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you just told them, right? So
Yeah.
it seems silly, but it's almost truth. You have to get that message in and show them why it's important, and then show them how you solve that problem at the end.
Yeah, I don't think that's silly at all, because it's interesting. You're so familiar with your presentation that you think you're starting to be boring, but it really helps people just to kind of stay in the mode and stay focused with you if you're repeating yourself. And at the beginning, obviously, you want to give them a clear outline of here's where we are, here's where we're going, and this is what you're going to get out of it. And then just keep repeating that all the way through your presentation.
Right. And listen, you're a human too, as the speaker. So change your stories up. Don't say the same words over and over for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Get some new stories, or talk to some other people, and keep it fun for yourself also, because people vibe off of the speaker. And if you're not having fun, no one else is going to have fun.
No, it's cool. It's cool. Okay, so as you're going towards the close of your presentation, what are some of the best signature phrases or closing techniques you've seen people use to leave a lasting impression with their presentations?
I hate the word techniques, and if I wrote it in the book, I'm sorry if that's where you got that question from. But signature phrases are good, right? It's your call to action. And if you think some of the greatest brands out there, they have them. So it doesn't have to be cheesy, but it's something that should be memorable and repeatable, something people in your own company, and even those hopefully outside of your company, can carry with them. So if we're talking the construction industry, one that comes to mind is, for the ones who get it done, right? Now, I'm sure some of your listeners have their own opinions on Home Depot, but I guarantee you 9 times out of 10, if they run out of something on a job site, they're going to send the guy down to Home Depot and maybe not one of the competitors. And it's because that brand reinforces speed, accessibility, reliability, and construction leaders, they can do the same thing in their closes. I had one safety director who would always end with, "No shortcut is worth a life," and his crews would repeat it back to him. And it's like, oh, okay. And then there was another executive that always ended with, "We don't just build projects, we build trust." And it was on their PowerPoint slides. And that really becomes part of the culture and your brand identity. So if it's short and sticky and memorable, this is something that can go a long way with your leadership also.
One thing that I found, particularly when you're doing a training where you want someone to do something practical as a result of that, I make a big emphasis in my presentations on less is more. In other words, I say, listen, I'm going to share a bunch of information here today, and you're not going to be able to do everything I tell you to do here. So what I want you to think about is that one thing that you're going to do as a result of what you've learned. What is your thought on that approach?
Yeah, exactly. You want someone to take something away. I mean, no, everyone wants to either be inspired or taught something. No one wants to be bored when the speaker's up there. So I use a very similar approach to what you're saying there. And because you're going to get a lot of information, and I'm in the firestop business, so it's like a fire hose. Everybody always chuckles at that one, but it is. You need to take 1 or 2 things that you start applying immediately, and then hopefully they are inspired enough at the end of your talk to take that action. And that's why doing things that are engaging, especially in trainings and longer presentations, where you grab the phone, check out the website, download this, or scan this QR code. You're getting people doing some things. You're getting them used to using the tools that hopefully you're there to show them how to use or sell or whatever it is, implement. And that's kind of what you should focus on there.
Okay, so let's say I finished my presentation then and went relatively well. I didn't collapse in a heap. The PowerPoint worked good, and the audience had a few smiles on their faces. What are some ways that I can debrief myself after a session so that I'm actually incrementally improving over time in my presentations?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I used to not debrief after my presentations. I pick up my laptop and move on to the next thing, the next presentation, whatever it was. And what happens is you keep making the same little mistakes over and over, and they can turn into bigger mistakes. So, as part of the book, I actually created this post-training survey, and the answer is you have to debrief. You just do, because there's always something in your talk that you can do better. And a couple months ago, I was doing a contractor training. It went great. Everyone was really raving about it. And the owner came up and they even said, "This was awesome." And we got great feedback. And I'm sitting there filling out my debrief. And I went a little fast through a section, and I noticed that there were a couple PowerPoint slides that needed to be cleaned up. And he looked down at my paper and he's like, "Well, what's that?" And it went great. "What are you critiquing yourself?" And I said, Kaizen, right? Continual improvement. And I wasn't nearly as satisfied as you were, but I appreciate the compliment. And the funny thing was, that stuck with him, and he ended up hiring me to coach him for a presentation that he was giving at the sales meeting. So Yeah, I tell every presenter now, just take a couple minutes. Your speech is not over until you debrief. And if you can build that habit, then you'll knock out some of those bad habits.
I like that. That's excellent. That's wonderful. So as we're wrapping up here, I have a couple of technical questions. PowerPoint. We've all been killed by PowerPoints. What are your recommendations for how to structure a PowerPoint presentation so it actually is powerful?
Less words. So like you said earlier, less is more. Picture is worth 1,000 words. So if you're in a highly technical field, showing that picture and showing it installed improperly, or what happens when it's not done right, or what happens when it's done right, and showing good pictures of what your message is trying to portray. I think that is important. As far as structuring the presentation, it's that AMP strategy like we talked about. It's just understanding that one or maybe two key messages that this audience needs to walk away with, and then building those out. And if you're starting from scratch on a PowerPoint, I always say, start with the amount of time you have. If it's 15 minutes, I'm from New Jersey. I talk pretty fast. This is as slow as I talk. I'm trying to match your pace, but all I want to do is talk faster. So I talk about a minute per slide. Some people talk a little bit slower than that. I've gotten some feedback that says I talk a little too fast. So a minute and a half per slide. So if you can kind of gauge it like that, get your opening, your 3 main points on 3 slides, and your close. I mean, you could have a PowerPoint of 5 slides. That's very effective if you use the right imagery and don't just rely on, a lot of words.
So how do you think improving your presentation skills can actually change the way a leader influences their team and drives business success?
Well, I mean, I guess if I would say one thing, it's, just getting that message right. And, that AMP strategy will help you to prepare the right words to say. You practice it with that simple strategy. And then how they're going to influence their teams is they're going to run kick-ass meetings, right?
Yeah, right.
I told you, I'm stealing all your stuff. And I love that term because it's true. If you run those CAMs, you're influencing your teams and you're driving business success. And that's really what it comes down to. I mean, there's way too many meetings that are agendaless, not well thought out. So people are more confused after they walked in, and leaders have to take a few minutes and say, who's my audience today? Is it a board member or a group of board that I'm trying to get money from? Or is it my team that I want to be safe on the job site? So what's that one message that they need to hear? And how am I going to deliver it clearly? And that's really what leadership is all about. It's having good communication, and there are ways to get better at it. I mean, your book, you yourself, Eric, you have a great program. You could hire a coach like me to help with your presentations.
Yep.
There's do-it-yourself programs out there like a Toastmasters. If you have some years to invest in the long game, I always recommend that for practice and feedback. But the big picture is, when your construction leaders improve their presentation skills, they're going to drive that in the culture, and they're going to change the culture of their companies. And that's really what it's all about, is helping people and companies communicate better.
That's excellent. So tell us a little bit more, John, about what you do and how people can get in touch with you, the book that you have, because there's a ton of great stuff here.
Appreciate that. Yeah. First, I mean, through one-on-one coaching, whether it's someone who's a novice speaker or even a seasoned executive that's just kind of working on tailoring their pitch or storytelling or body language, their confidence and getting up in front of the room. So one-on-one coaching, if we're talking about public speaking training, I've done workshops for different organizations, a half day, full day, doing things like elevator pitches, impromptu speaking. So you're extemporaneous. I nailed it, right? I was like, don't say it. I said it anyway. So killer sales presentations. We do train-the-trainer programs. And then if corporately, I've seen a mess, it's the marketing, the engineering, the sales. I call it the mess. So if you can turn those folks into subject matter experts, so just a different way of thinking, So same letters in that acronym, turn them into subject matter experts. And then you're working as a higher performance team at that point in time.
That's excellent. So where can people get in touch with you?
So they can email me at john@corporatebrandinc.com, and they can check out the book on Amazon.
Excellent. Yeah, we'll have a link in the show notes to the book, and make sure that your email is in the show notes as well. And John, I tell you, it's been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed having you on the show. Thanks for joining us here today.
It was awesome. I appreciate the opportunity again. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with John. I found this tremendously helpful. Take that AMP framework, audience message project, and that real framework, a relatable person who encounters a problem, who takes action, and who learns something to build your stories. And contact John if you have any questions about his presentation training, and also buy his book on Amazon. Appreciate you listening today. Give the show a rating and a review wherever you get your podcasts, and I'll catch you on the next one. Thank you for listening to this episode of Construction Genius. Hope you found that 1% of inspiration to help you in the next few days. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star review on iTunes, share it with other construction leaders who you think would benefit, and always remember that the show is brought to you by Kick-Ass Meetings. I've been working with construction leaders since 2004, teaching them how to run extremely effective problem-solving meetings that gets their people collaborating, taps into their creativity, and to get yourself a free copy of the Kick-Ass Meeting Report, go to www.ericanderton.com/kickassmeetings. Grab yourself that free report, read it, use it in your business. You'll find it extremely useful. And thanks again for listening.